Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
It happened late one night in a small town in New Jersey at one of those 24-hour Dunkin Donuts locations where most of the late customers are either exhausted truckers or aimless teenagers. Melissa, a college student, had just started her night shift job there. She wasn't worried about it. After all, how scary could serving coffee and donuts really be? Her first few nights were uneventful. A few odd customers here and there, the usual creepy stares from drifters, but nothing she couldn't handle. Then, during her third week, things started getting strange. It began with a man who would stand outside by the glass window, just staring in. He never ordered anything, never even stepped inside, just stared. Melissa would ask her coworker, an older man named Greg, if he noticed, but every time she pointed him out, the man was gone. One night, while Greg was on his smoke break and Melissa was alone inside, the man finally came in. He didn't say a word. He didn't order. He just walked slowly to the corner of the store and sat down at a booth, hands folded on the table, staring at her. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes were wrong. They were too wide, unblinking, and somehow gleamed in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Melissa tried to ignore him, but every time she glanced up, he was still staring, smiling now. A huge, crooked smile that looked painful to hold. After 10 minutes, Greg came back in, laughing about something on his phone, and just like that, the man was gone. The booth was empty. Melissa hadn't heard the door chime. She hadn't seen him leave. He had just vanished. Greg shrugged it off, said maybe she needed sleep. Maybe she did. But that night when she got home, she found a Dunkin Donuts napkin tucked into the handle of her front door. Scribbled on it, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Thanks for noticing me." She tried not to let it get to her. She didn't tell anyone. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe some weird loner playing a joke. But the following nights got worse. She'd find coffee cups rearranged into strange symbols behind the counter when she was sure she was alone. She'd hear heavy breathing from the drive-through speaker even when no cars were there. Sometimes the register would open by itself and the lights would flicker. The worst night was her last. Around 3 a.m., after Greg had stepped out for another smoke, the man came back. This time, he walked straight up to the counter. Up close, Melissa could see his skin was cracked, like old leather. His clothes were filthy, caked in something dark. He leaned in so close she could smell him, wet earth and rot, and said, in a voice that was somehow both a whisper and a shout, "You didn't lock your door." Melissa's heart hammered in her chest. She stumbled back, knocking over a tray of donuts. She fumbled for her phone, but before she could call 911, Greg burst through the door, shouting. The man turned to him, and then he just collapsed into a puddle of black sludge on the floor. It soaked into the tiles, leaving no trace but a terrible, sweet-sour smell that hung in the air for days. Melissa never went back after that. She quit that night and moved out of town. Months later, she heard the Dunkin Donuts close down permanently. Health violation, they said, mold problems, but she knew better. She sometimes still dreams of that pale man standing just outside her window, smiling, waiting for her to notice him again.
Story number 2.
It was supposed to be a routine trip, a simple break from work. Dan and his girlfriend, Jenny, decided to take a weekend road trip up the coast to clear their heads. They were halfway through the trip when they pulled into a small town. It seemed quiet, too quiet, but they didn't think much of it. The sun was setting, and they were hoping to grab dinner at a diner and head out by nightfall. The town had a strange, eerie charm about it, with old houses lining the streets and a thick fog beginning to roll in. They found a local diner that seemed like something out of an old movie. Small, dimly lit, with checkered floors and vintage booths. The waitress who greeted them had a smile that was too wide, her eyes too hollow. Jenny felt a chill down her spine, but she pushed it aside, thinking it was just the long drive. They sat at a booth by the window, and as they looked over the menu, they noticed something odd. The town was completely silent. No car engines, no voices from the streets, just an unnatural quiet that pressed in from all sides. Their waitress returned, setting down 2 cups of coffee. "How's your drive been?" she asked, her voice too sweet, too rehearsed. "Good, just a bit tired," Dan replied, trying to shake off the odd feeling. Jenny kept glancing toward the door, which had this strange creak when it swung open, as if the hinges hadn't been oiled in years. That's when the first person walked in. He was tall, too tall, and his body seemed too stiff, like he was moving in slow motion. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes were black, so black that it made Dan's stomach turn. The man didn't look at anyone. He didn't order anything. He just stood by the door and stared out the window. His hands hung limply at his sides, and every few moments he would tilt his head, as if listening to something only he could hear. Jenny shuddered. "Do you see him?" she whispered to Dan. "Yeah, I see him," he muttered, trying to focus on the menu. The waitress was still standing there, smiling at them, her hands folded on the edge of the table. "Anything else I can get for you?" Dan was about to ask for more coffee when he noticed something in her eyes, something dark, something hungry. The moment they locked eyes, the temperature in the diner dropped, and a voice inside his head whispered, "Get out!" Dan's pulse quickened. He wanted to leave, but his body felt frozen in place, as if it wasn't his own anymore. Jenny's hand gripped his tightly, her knuckles white. She had seen it too, the waitress's pupils, expanding and contracting like something was controlling her, something not human. The man by the door suddenly moved, his body jerking as if on a string, turning to face them. His lips parted in a wide grin, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too many. A deep, guttural sound rumbled from his throat, something that wasn't a word but a low growl. He began to walk toward them, his feet dragging, his shadow stretching unnaturally long on the diner's floor. The waitress didn't move, didn't even blink. Jenny grabbed Dan's arm. "We need to go, now." But Dan couldn't move. He was paralyzed by the terror that was clawing at his insides. The man was inches from them now, his breath hot and foul against their skin. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he stopped. His body jerked back like someone had pulled an invisible string, and he collapsed into the booth across the room. A low hiss filled the air. Without thinking, Jenny stood up, yanked Dan to his feet, and pulled him toward the door. As they stumbled outside into the thick fog, they turned around and saw the diner in the distance. It was still, silent, as if time had stopped inside. Then, just before they reached their car, they heard it, like a chorus of whispers coming from the direction of the diner. "We're waiting for you." They drove off without looking back, the fog swallowing up the town behind them. They never stopped again in that town. They never spoke of it again either. But both of them knew, deep down, that the town was never really empty. It had just been waiting for them to come. And if they ever returned, they might not leave again.
Story number 3.
It was a chilly October night when Caleb, a young journalist, found himself staying at an old rundown hotel at the edge of a forgotten town. The kind of hotel you'd only stumble across after hours of driving down long, empty highways with nothing but a flickering streetlight to guide you. Caleb had been on assignment, researching small-town legends and ghost stories for a piece he was writing. But he hadn't expected to find anything truly frightening, at least not at this hotel. The moment he stepped inside, he was hit with a smell that made his stomach churn, a mix of mildew, dust, and something faintly metallic. The lobby was dimly lit, and the only sound was the soft hum of a fan in the corner. Behind the desk, a woman stood. She was tall, with pale skin and a long black dress that looked like it belonged to another era. Her face was thin, her lips a shade of red too dark, almost unnatural. "Good evening," she said, her voice low and melodic. "Checking in?" "Yes," Caleb replied, trying not to look too uncomfortable. "Just one night." She handed him a rusty key, number 13, and then added, "The room is special. You'll find it quite historic." Caleb chuckled, thinking it was some marketing gimmick. "I'm sure," he muttered under his breath. "Thanks." As he made his way down the hallway, the air grew colder, and the floorboards creaked under his feet. The hotel was eerily silent, no chatter, no music, no guests bustling about, just the long stretch of hall with its faded wallpaper peeling at the edges. When Caleb finally reached room 13, he unlocked the door and entered. The room looked as ancient as the rest of the hotel, worn furniture, dusty curtains, and a bed with a frame that looked like it could collapse at any moment. But there was something else. In the far corner of the room, a large full-length mirror stood, its surface cracked, the edges tarnished with age. He shrugged it off and set his suitcase down, But just as he was about to sit on the bed, a low voice came from behind him. "Don't!" Caleb froze, his blood running cold. The voice was faint but distinct, and it sounded as though it had come from the mirror. He turned around quickly, but there was no one in the room, just him and the broken mirror. He stepped closer to it, peering into the cracked surface. At first, it looked like a normal reflection, his face, the dim light of the room. But then, out of the corner of his eye, something moved. A figure, pale, twisted, with long, matted hair, appeared behind him in the reflection, standing in the dark corner of the room. Its eyes were black, empty voids, and its mouth twisted into an agonizing smile. Caleb stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. He spun around to face the corner, but it was empty. The room was as silent as before. But when he glanced back at the mirror, the figure was still there, inches away from his reflection, its fingers slowly reaching out toward him. "Get out!" the voice whispered again, this time clearer, more urgent. Caleb felt the chill of fear spread through him. His mind raced. Was this some kind of trick? A prank by the hotel staff? But the air felt too thick, too oppressive. His hands were shaking as he grabbed his phone to call for help, but the signal was dead. He tried to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. He was locked in. The figure in the mirror began to laugh, a low, guttural sound that echoed through the room, and Caleb could see its shadow growing longer, reaching across the floor toward him. He backed into the far wall, eyes fixed on the mirror, waiting for it to move. But when he looked again, the reflection was different. It wasn't him anymore. The figure now stood in his place. The woman behind the desk had lied. This hotel wasn't just old, it was cursed. And Caleb realized with a gut-wrenching horror that the mirror had claimed countless souls before him. Each one trapped in that cracked surface, forever a reflection of something that once was but never would be again. The last thing Caleb saw was the smile of the figure in the mirror, just inches away from him. He could feel its cold breath on his neck, and then nothing. The next morning, the hotel was empty again. The lobby was quiet, the lights dim, as if nothing had ever happened. But when a new guest checked in, they were handed a key. Room 13, of course. And when they passed the hallway mirrors, a single figure could be seen standing just behind them, grinning from ear to ear. The mirror had claimed its next victim,